Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Danielle Kirkby. I am a customer success manager here at ServiceRocket, I am based in Wilmington, North Carolina. Today we are going to go beyond the migration, and we'll discuss 5 ways to take full advantage of Atlassian Cloud. And before we dive into the material, I just want to share a little more information about us in case you are new to ServiceRocket. ServiceRocket is the leading provider of tech-enabled services, helping fast-growing companies in the acceleration of their growth. We are a platinum solution and platinum marketplace partner of Atlassian and can offer assistance with managed services, tech consulting, training, licensing, and more. Essentially a one-stop shop for all of your needs. And as mentioned, my name is Danielle, but leading us in today's webinar, we are joined by the amazing Fugi Sim, who is a solutions manager here at ServiceRocket and is based in our London office. Fugi, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and take it over from here.
All right, thank you, Danielle. All right. Welcome everyone to the webinar. My name is Fugi and I am the Solutions Manager in ServiceRocket based out of London, UK. I've been with ServiceRocket for 11 years, so most of that time is just working with Atlassian products. So I live and breathe Atlassian essentially. So let's go quickly over the agenda for today. We will essentially discuss the 5 ways to take full advantage of Atlassian Cloud by way of transformation. So namely governance, access, ITSM, reporting, and training. And then we will then wrap up with a 10-minute Q&A session at the end. But if you have any questions at all while I'm going through any of these points, feel free to put them into the chat and we can then make this session a bit more interactive. And Danielle will be moderating the chat to make sure there's any questions that I should answer throughout the session as well. So, all right. So you've migrated to cloud, you look around and there seems to be a lot of difference in how it looks and its features versus your old data center instance. The UI is definitely cleaner now, it's more user-friendly, and your admin team now has all this free time on their hands from not having to deal with upgrades, performance issues, etc. Gone are the old ways of working. Remember those particularly painful upgrades over long weekends? And sometimes they fail and you have to do a rollback. And also remember those security advisory that Atlassian keeps sending out every now and then. And the previous one was pretty recent as well. And also, something to keep in mind is, all of those backup jobs that you need to run as well. And those backups are not necessarily 100% foolproof. And yeah, those are the old ways of working that we are hoping to change as you are now in cloud. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Essentially, you now have more money from not having to manage your on-premise infrastructure, more time from not having to deal with DC-related issues, and more control from a more streamlined architecture. One of the main complaints we hear from users moving to cloud is the fact that there's a lack of customization. You cannot customize your look and feel as you did in the past with JavaScript, with all of those crazy CSS that you add to your announcement banner in Jira or to your custom CSS in Confluence. Now, even though those have gone, it's actually a good thing. We'll discuss this more in detail during governance, but essentially you will see that by having this lack of customization, you now have more control. So anyone has other advantages they would like to share since moving to cloud? Feel free to write in the chat. Now, does that mean that your IT staff are at risk of losing their jobs ever since moving to cloud? Because now the days of working in infrastructure is gone? The answer is no, because it is now more important than ever for your IT staff to adopt a different approach to Jira administration. Consider a good governance model and strategy that ensures the system is scalable. The days of creating new custom fields, screens, or adding someone as a Jira admin without proper discovery and documentation are over. I once had to work with a customer's Jira instance that have at least 6 custom fields of the same name and type. Imagine they would have 6 custom fields called environment, and all of them is of the type select list. Now, all used individually in separate projects and no one being able to explain what each one is for. So most of the team members also have Jira admin rights, because guess what? Each time somebody needs a new Jira project or to add an additional status to their workflows, they will be granted Jira admin privilege to create and configure those. No one was removed after that. Now, this is one customer's example, but we've seen this in a few customers as well. Usually when somebody requests for a specific change to Jira, they are given Jira admin rights, because frankly, the Jira administration team, the appointed Jira administrators, do not have the time to take care of those back in on-premise, because they are too busy working with upgrades, with security patches, to the point that they would only have time on infrastructure and no time on actual governance. So the kind of governance I'm talking today deals with incremental changes that you or your team plans to deploy to your all-new cloud instance. With enterprise and premium license for cloud, you have the added advantage of staging changes in your product sandbox. This means that changes do not need to happen directly in your production environment, which can be very risky. Instead, changes can be properly tested in your sandbox before promoting them to production after the necessary change approvals. Now, this is something that is available to enterprise and premium. And if you go to admin.atlassian.com, you can search for sandbox and you can create your own sandbox for you to test out any changes you need to make to Jira or Confluence. All right, next slide. Essentially, you will be turning badly configured instances like this one. If you notice, there's like 4 system fields with the same name and the same type, each one having one context. And then next slide, you will turn them into this, essentially one system field with 3 contexts. And notice that some contexts don't need to be recreated, so you only have 3. One of the customers we work with have a very strict requirements in regards to custom fields, like this one. Essentially, their instance is just covered with fields that have a purpose and have contexts that are shared. All requests for a custom field needs to first go through a page where the user needs to search for an existing custom field based on a desired type. For example, if they want a select list or a checkbox, and see whether the name of any field makes sense for the use case. If there are anything found here, then the requester can just choose to use the field in their project. If, however, none fits the needs, then a proper change management process, which we will discuss in the next slide, needs to kick off. So the purpose of that is to identify the goal and purpose of the additional field and to properly document and stage the creation of that field to make sure no other projects are affected and that the risk of introducing the field is minimal. You know, something as simple as introducing a custom field may seem very easy for you to just implement, but I can assure you that implementing a new custom field without justifying them can cause a situation in the future, especially when we are doing audits or when we are trying to clean up Jira configuration. The documentation requirement here also ensures that if there's any cleanup, it will be easy to identify who made the change, who approved, and why a change was needed. This sounds a bit too much, but try to look at it. It will be very useful in your environment, I'm sure, as you scale towards an instance that is much, much larger. So next slide. So this is a governance example. So it is a lot of steps, right? You will have a kickoff, determine the team, and I would usually recommend that you group a bunch of changes together, like for example, introducing a bunch of custom fields, a bunch of screens, and then you create a team where you define success and timelines, and then you do a proper discovery as to why those screens, those workflow changes are needed. You define the current state and the future state, and then you go through the proof of concept, the staging build in the staging cloud instance, and then you go through proper user acceptance testing before you then go into production, cut over, and UAT, and then training and support. Of course, all of this can be complicated, and if you have any changes that you are struggling to implement in your company, feel free to talk to ServiceRocket, because we can help you go through all of these governance steps as well. All right, so there's a question: can customer fields be a problem for the customers too if they are doing business to business? Could custom fields cause confusion or issues in the workflow? It depends on where you're introducing the field. Is it in a customer form, or is it in a specific screen? So if you, for example, if you have specific fields that has no, if it's in a customer form, then if you just put in there without a description about what they're used for, then they can be confusing. And if you just add or remove without actually going through the dependencies, because some fields are dependent on a automation rule, for example, or a filter, then this can cause problems with the Jira project. So, which is why I mentioned earlier, documentation is very important, because you would then have a list of things that are dependent on a specific field. Then it's easy for you to make the decision. All right, most welcome. Thank you for the question. Next slide, please. All right, one other thing you can take full advantage of with Atlassian Cloud is the ease of access to it. And access has become a huge topic, especially since the pandemic. Companies that are still using on-premise solutions find it difficult to adapt to the new way of working. I certainly remember the panic from some of these companies reaching out to ServiceRocket for help to get their employees ready to work from home. Having your Atlassian products in the cloud provides ease of access to Atlassian tools as well as other non-Atlassian tools connected to the same SSO provider via SAML. And SAML is something that you can enable via Atlassian Access. So one login to any tool, and Atlassian Access takes care of the single sign-on. Consistent and works on mobile too. So users no longer need to worry about VPNs. Remember those times where you have to first sign into your VPN before you can even access Confluence or Jira? Well, you don't have to do that anymore with Access. And one of the questions that we get from admin team is this secure? And I can show you the new SAML standards and what's implemented on Atlassian Access. It's really secure. It's probably more secure than a lot of what your traditional VPN infrastructure can provide. So your support team will also benefit from lesser tickets related to access or VPN issues. So no more such tickets as like, I lost access, I need your help to reset my password. And then your IT team can now focus on more important tasks. Cool, next slide, please. All right, the other thing that most of us kind of ignore when we move to cloud is the fact that ITSM is great in cloud. It's actually even better in cloud than in DC. One previous experience I had with ITSM is that in the past, cloud's ITSM is not as great with DC because they don't have things like Insight. And even though Insight Cloud was released, it was initially not well integrated to GSM. But now with the acquisition of Mindville from Atlassian and also Opportunity, these are all now bundled with your premium and enterprise. It does transform your GSM into one of the most powerful ITSM tools in the market right now. So good, in fact, that ServiceRocket is taking ServiceNow head-on based on our experience migrating ServiceNow customers to GSM. A lot of the customers that we migrated from ServiceNow to GSM just couldn't look back anymore. They were like, there's no point using ServiceNow because most of the functionality is already provided by GSM, bar a few, and they don't have to pay the same amount of billing that they paid in ServiceNow, which is very, very expensive. So with cloud, the integration between all functionalities is seamless, and it feels as though you're just working with GSM without any context switch. So if you go into GSM right now, if you're trying to look at your roster which is an Ops Genie feature, or your schedule alerts, those kind of stuff, you can see that everything can be done within the JSM screen without going into a separate login screen for Ops Genie. Remember the previous painful integration you had to do in Jira DC just to get this working. And even Insight, just to get this working in DC, requires a bunch of effort. So now it's time to take full advantage of this now that you're in cloud. An example here is a user experiencing an incident raises an issue in Jira Service Management, indicating that their IBM System Z is down. Now, this then triggers the Insight automation to set the status to action needed for that particular server. And because that server is connected to services in Insight, it will then alert Ops Genie. And also status page. So the status page for those services that are dependent on that server is now automatically set to a major outage. So users, when they cannot access that particular service, when they go into status page, they know something is wrong and they can subscribe to updates, and they don't have to raise a separate Jira Service Management ticket. And Ops Genie is great as well, because when this incident is raised, Ops Genie determines the criticality of the issue and determines whether it should alert the necessary agents, or whether this can be something that is not as urgent, and therefore the alerting rules does not trigger. But sometimes Ops Genie will also go through a roster. So you can set up like rosters within Ops Genie so that only the specific on-call agent will be alerted and not the entire team. It's pretty cool. All right, next slide, please. Okay, now that you're in cloud, you should also revisit your previous reporting needs and take advantage of the fact that through the transformation steps we mentioned earlier, it's easier than ever to create a program level or plan level reporting using tools like advanced roadmaps. Fields are now more streamlined across projects thanks to all the governance that we talked about previously. So because fields are now streamlined across projects, workflows and statuses are too. So with advanced roadmaps and dashboards, you can then start pulling in issues from different projects to present a consolidated plan level or program level view to show you the overall progress of all work streams across the organization. And you know why governance is important is because once you have all of these streamlined, each status means the same thing. The definition of done means the same thing for all organizations. All squads within your organization. It is then very easy for you to pull those reports or to show them into your advanced roadmaps plan and determine exactly what is the status of every single task and epics. I would even recommend EasyBI as an additional third-party app that you can consider if the out-of-the-box Jira project reports are insufficient for your needs. And EasyBI is really powerful. Almost 7 out of 10 customers in ServiceRocket uses EasyBI for their reporting needs. So that's something that you should explore as well. Bottom line is this: with a better governed and streamlined system in the cloud, reporting is now easier and you can show you more insights to how your organization is performing. All right, next slide. All right, get your users and admins familiarized with the new cloud environment by enrolling them on cloud-specific Jira and Confluence trainings. Now, remember what I mentioned earlier about customization or lack thereof in cloud? This actually creates a standard look and feel. And because of that, your users will find it easier to apply what they learn from the standard Atlassian training sessions into your cloud instance, because what they see in the training is exactly what they see in your instance. These trainings also help them to understand key concepts and best practice that will help with the overall governance of the system. Projects will be set up correctly, and project admins will not find themselves requesting for access that they do not need. I'm sure a lot of you that are Jira admins would be so familiar with all of the requests for Jira admin permissions, just so that a project admin can add a status to their workflow. So by having them go through training, they would then understand the the permissions that they already have and the kind of actions that they can take on their own. And then overall, you are going to get a lot less workload from just users requesting for items from you. So both Jira and Confluence will also be used to its full potential as users become more familiar with the use of specific page macros, blueprints, Jira gadgets, reporting, JQL, and the list goes on. I just delivered 2 training last week, Jira Essentials with Agile Mindset and Confluence Essentials. And, even for a team that I was teaching, and this team is quite familiar with Jira, even then they were quite surprised with certain features that you can use within Jira and Confluence. For example, like things like page properties report macro, which is really powerful, and also creating multiple Jira issues from a single table in Confluence. And because of that, they are now able to look at using product requirements properly, the product requirements blueprint. And potentially that could be where they gather all of their product requirements moving on. So which is really great, and it helps generate more value for Confluence and Jira in your organization. So talk to ServiceRocket if you want to find out more about the trainings that we can deliver. And with that said, that's it for today's presentation. Next slide. And I will now address some of the questions that you may have. So feel free to write any questions that you have into the Q&A or just into the chat. And back to you, Danielle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fugi. If anyone has, we do have another question. Can you get a total cost of ownership for the Jira issue ties to a service product? Jira issue tied to a service product, I'm assuming.
Total cost of ownership for the Jira issues tied to a service or product. I'm sure if you set it up as a custom field, I know I'm preaching against creating custom fields, but if you have specific need for a custom field, go ahead and create it. For example, you can have cost of ownership that is a custom field in your Jira issue, and it's a number value. You can use EasyBI to total them up into so EasyBI has reports that you can customize and a formula. Yeah, by adding all issues together in the customer field. Yeah, got it. That is correct.
All right.
Most welcome. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much for the questions. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to put them in. We can hang around for another minute or so. And as mentioned on this slide, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to Fugi or directly to our sales team, or me. It's just my first name dot last name at ServiceRocket. We would be happy to help, and we really appreciate all of you dialing into our webinar today. Fugi,
there's another question, by the way, Danielle.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. I didn't even see it. Oh, thank you. I didn't scroll down far enough. Okay, what's the biggest mistake you see companies make that doesn't enable them to make the most out of cloud, or the one thing people don't take advantage of?
I think it's to do with falling back with the old ways of working. The common scenario I see is because, like, for example, they move to cloud and then they see that there's a lack of customization, and then they immediately introduce theming tools or tools that allow them to host cloud outside of cloud, if you know what that means. I'm not going to name the exact add-ons, but essentially there are add-ons that allow you to customize cloud like really heavily. But the problem with doing that is that then you create that old situation where your users then have to, whenever there's problems with those look and feel, you have to spend a lot of time fixing that. So your IT resources are still working as they did in the past, like fixing Jira and Confluence related issues instead of focusing on governance. I have nothing against deploying customization add-ons. And also another mistake I see is trying to mirror exactly how DC used to work, because when you move to the cloud, you need to have a new set of expectations. by using more default out-of-the-box functionality instead of trying to customize it by deploying a bunch of add-ons. Once you start focusing on mirroring it, that's when you have a situation where your users would then just request for the same thing all over again. Your instance would then be, really heavily customized. There's a lot of things you have to fix when you delete a certain custom field, for example. A bunch of add-ons fail, then you have to reset those again. Another thing is just lack of governance. After moving to cloud, there's no rules. People are still Jira admins. The whole entire company is Jira admin. So they have all the capabilities of introducing custom field screens, introducing their own projects. There's no project cleanup. Those kind of stuff, I think, is what hinders people from making the most out of cloud.
Awesome. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Fugi. We have any tips regarding privacy and security in the cloud? This is the biggest pushback to move our instance to cloud.
I think there are a bunch of Atlassian articles that show the kind of security steps they're moving towards, and it's amazing what they're doing. There's a bunch of it. I wouldn't bore you with the Atlassian, but you can go ahead and read those through. They do a bunch of like security testing, where there's also a bug bounty, where you can they challenge people to hack Jira and Confluence, and so there's a bounty given. So they do a bunch of stuff just to make sure it's hardened. I would try to look for, so Daniel, that's a action item for us. We will look for the exact cloud, Atlassian Cloud documentation on security, because that one has all the details about why you should move to cloud, because the security in cloud is actually better than how you would do it in DC. Because in DC, every time there's a security issue, like remember the previous security advisory that was released, a lot of customers actually face a lot of problem trying to patch those, because it involves quite a few steps that requires downtime. With Atlassian Cloud, you don't have those, because every time there's an advisory, it is immediately patched by Atlassian. There's no downtime to you. So I would say that's the biggest advantage you would see in terms of security moving to cloud. Do we have to pay DC and cloud if we want to migrate to cloud? It depends on whether you have a license that is still active. If you have for example, if you have a server or a DC that has a license that is still active, you can move to the cloud. And then in the meantime, while you're trying to move to the cloud, you don't have to pay for a cloud license yet until you're officially live. That's something that you can request Atlassian to help you out, because Atlassian will deploy temporary licenses while you are migrating.
Awesome. Any final questions? These are really great questions, guys. Thanks so much for sending these through. Fugi, anything else on your end that you want to add before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I noticed the questions about about pushback and moving to cloud. So those are not covered in today's webinar, but it was covered in a previous webinar we delivered before on delivering successful cloud migrations. I suggest that you go back and watch that, because that is really helpful to help you make the decision on moving to cloud. Because this one, the webinar that we're doing today is more about you already moving to cloud and then how you can take advantage of it. So if you're wondering what the steps are on the actual migration and how to enable a successful migration, then go ahead and watch that old webinar that we have. Because that, I can guarantee you, after you watch that, you will be more at ease about moving to cloud and all the challenges that you may face and the kind of help that you can get.
Great point. Thanks for noting that, Fugi. That's a great thing to bring up.
All right, welcome.
All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions coming through. So we will go ahead and give you all a little bit of time back in your day. But thank you again for joining us today. It was really great. And thank you, Fugi, for all of the amazing information. And stay tuned for our future webinars that we will be hosting. Thank you.
Thanks,
See you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.